In June 1942, a fortress that had held out for 240 days fell in a single day. 33,000 soldiers laid down their arms before a German general who had promised his men one last decisive victory. This is the story of Tobruk, the desert stronghold that made Erwin Rommel a legend, and the men who paid the price for its fall. Photo Noche Ausland, the Desert War by 1941. North Africa had become a brutal proving ground for a new kind of warfare. Fought not in trenches, but across hundreds of miles of open desert, where fuel and water mattered as much as ammunition. Into this arena stepped a small German force under a general almost unknown outside the army, Erwin Rommel, sent to rescue his Italian allies after their catastrophic defeats. Few expected him to change the course of the entire campaign. Photo Noche Ausland. Tobruk, the key to the coast. Tobruk was no ordinary town. Its deep natural harbor made it the only port between Benghazi and Alexandria capable of supplying an army, and whoever held it controlled the coastal supply line. When Rommel's advance swept the British back in early 1941, Tobruk alone refused to fall, its garrison digging in behind old Italian defenses and vowing to hold the line no matter the cost. The rats of Tobruk cut off and surrounded. The mostly Australian garrison endured constant shelling, suffocating heat, and swarms of flies for over 240 days. Axis propaganda mocked them as trapped rats in a desert hole. The men adopted the insult as a badge of honor, calling themselves the Rats of Tobruk with defiant pride. Their stubborn resistance became one of the most celebrated stands of the entire Desert War. Rommel's panzers arrived while the siege dragged on. Rommel built up his Afrika Korps, lean, fast-moving panzer units trained for the wide-open desert. His panzer, Is and Is, though often outnumbered, moved with a speed and coordination the Allies struggled to match. Rommel personally led from the front, a habit that would earn him the nickname the Desert Fox among friend and enemy alike. Planning the next blow in the shade of camouflage netting, Rommel and his officers pored over maps, debating where the Allied lines were weakest. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Rommel trusted his instincts over rigid doctrine, often overruling cautious staff advice to strike where the enemy least expected it. This aggressive style unsettled his own high command almost as much as it unsettled the British. Gazala. Setting the trap by May 1942. The front line ran through a stretch of desert known as Gazala, protected by a maze of minefields and fortified boxes. Rommel gambled everything on a bold flanking maneuver, sending his panzers on a night march around the southern edge of the Allied line, a risk that could have ended his career, or delivered him the victory he needed. Life on the supply line behind every panzer battle stood an unglamorous struggle, keeping trucks fueled and men fed across hundreds of miles of sand. Vehicles broke down constantly in the heat and dust, and even senior officers were sometimes seen pushing stalled cars themselves. Rommel understood better than most that this campaign would be won or lost on logistics as much as on the battlefield. The cauldron, the Gazala battle, collapsed into chaos in an area soon nicknamed the Cauldron, a churning, close-range tank battle where visibility dropped to a few hundred meters in the swirling dust. Losses on both sides were severe, but Rommel's tighter coordination between tanks, artillery, and anti-tank guns slowly began to grind down the Allied armor. The Allied line breaks after weeks of grinding attrition. The Allied position at Gazala finally gave way. British and Commonwealth forces began a fighting withdrawal eastward, leaving Tobruk once again isolated, but this time with far less time to prepare its defenses than it had enjoyed the year before. Rommel wasted no time turning his full attention toward the fortress. A different kind of siege, unlike the long 1941 siege, Rommel had no intention of settling in for months. He planned a concentrated, overwhelming assault, massing his artillery and Stuka dive bombers for a single, devastating blow rather than a slow encirclement. Speed, he believed, was now more valuable to him than caution. The bombardment at dawn on the 20th of June, 1942. German and Italian guns opened fire on Tobruk's perimeter in one of the heaviest bombardments of the Desert War. Dive bombers screamed down on the defenses in wave after wave, tearing gaps through minefields and wire that had taken the garrison months to build. Within hours, the outer defenses were already crumbling. Breakthrough German engineers cleared paths through the shattered minefields almost as fast as the bombardment finished, and panzer columns poured through the gap before the defenders could reorganize. It was a stunning contrast to the year before. What had once taken the Allies 8 months to hold fell to Rommel's assault in a matter of hours. Racing for the harbor, by midday, German tanks were already rolling toward the town center and the vital harbor, brushing aside scattered pockets of resistance. Smoke rose from burning fuel depots as demolition teams scrambled to destroy anything of value before it could fall into German hands, but there was simply no time left to finish the job. A garrison in chaos this time. Tobruk was defended chiefly by a South African-led garrison under Major General Hendrik Klopper, alongside British and Indian units, but communication between units broke down rapidly as German forces split the defense in two. Isolated pockets fought on bravely, but the overall picture facing Klopper grew bleaker by the hour. Surrender on the morning of the 21st of June, 1942, white flags rose over Tobruk. In barely 24 hours, a fortress that had defied Rommel for the better part of a year fell completely into German hands, one of the largest single capitulations suffered by British Commonwealth forces during the entire war. 33,000 men marched away. Roughly 33,000 Allied soldiers, British, South African, and Indian troops, were taken prisoner in a single stroke, along with vast stockpiles of fuel, food, and vehicles that Rommel's supply-starved army desperately needed. For Rommel, it was the crowning achievement of his desert campaign. 33,000 men marched away. Roughly 33,000 Allied soldiers, British, South African, and Indian troops, were taken prisoner in a single stroke, along with vast stockpiles of fuel, food, and vehicles that Rommel's supply-starved army desperately needed. For Rommel, it was the crowning achievement of his desert campaign. Rommel's reward news of the victory reached Adolf Hitler within hours, and he responded by promoting Rommel to field marshal on the spot at 49, one of the youngest men ever to hold that rank in the German army. For a brief, glittering moment, Rommel stood at the absolute peak of his military reputation. Churchill's darkest hour. Winston Churchill received the news while in Washington meeting President Roosevelt, a personal humiliation he later called one of the heaviest blows of the entire war. Yet the Fall of Tobruk also lit a fuse. Within months, the Allies would regroup at a small Egyptian rail stop named El Alamein, determined that Rommel's triumph would be his last.